The fall of Brightwell and the rise of legacy. The story of Jessica Carter, the collapse of Brightwell Enterprises, began with what seemed like a simple misunderstanding. But in reality, it was the unmasking of a deeply ingrained culture of arrogance and discrimination. Jessica Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Technologies, had no intention of making a scene when she entered the gleaming lobby of Brightwell's downtown headquarters. Dressed in a tailored charcoal cashmere sweater, modest slacks, and flats, she embodied understated sophistication. There was no entourage, no PR team trailing behind her, just her quiet presence, confident and poised. To the receptionist. However, Jessica was invisible. Ashley Monroe, a blonde with cold blue eyes and an inflated sense of self-importance, glanced up from her phone long enough to assess Jessica's dark skin and simple elegance. And in an instant, she made a judgment call, one grounded not in fact, but in centuries of prejudice. "Deliveries go around the back," Ashley sneered, not bothering to hide the contempt in her tone. Without verifying her identity, she gestured for security, waving Jessica off like an uninvited guest. Jessica remained calm, her voice poised. "Good morning. I have an appointment with Mr. Richard Lawson at 9. Please check the schedule." Ashley chuckled dryly, typing nonsense into the keyboard before replying. "No appointment under that name. You should leave before I call security again." Jessica stood tall, unmoved by the slight. She repeated firmly, "Please check again." Ashley raised her hand and grabbed Jessica's sweater. "I said leave." In that moment, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted. Jessica's gaze dropped to Ashley's hand on her sleeve, then rose, slow and deliberate, to lock eyes with the receptionist. "Remove your hand from me," she said, her voice carrying quiet authority. Ashley flinched, then shouted, "Security! Trouble at the front desk." Two guards stormed over, grabbed Jessica's arms, and began to escort her out. She didn't resist. Her expression was unreadable, her back straight, her eyes calm. From a balcony overhead, Vanessa Lewis, Brightwell's only black mid-level manager, watched in stunned silence, her stomach twisting. She recognized Jessica instantly. The tech visionary. The very woman Brightwell hoped to secure a transformative partnership with. But Vanessa couldn't move, couldn't speak. She knew the cost of intervention in a place like this, and she watched in helpless guilt as Jessica was shoved through the front doors. Mark Reynolds, executive vice president and longtime adversary of Richard Lawson, stepped out of the executive elevator at that exact moment. He saw Jessica, knew exactly who she was, and said nothing. A small, satisfied smirk danced at the corners of his mouth. Outside on the sidewalk, Jessica stood momentarily still. She looked up at the Brightwell logo glinting in the sunlight and smiled. A smile that was cold, decisive, and terrifying in its calm. She reached into her pocket and pressed a button on her phone. "Execute Plan B," she said quietly. "Cancel everything with Brightwell." Across the lobby, Ashley Monroe returned to her desk, smirking with smug satisfaction. "People like that always think they're important," she muttered to her colleague. "Never know their place." Back upstairs, Mark Reynolds leaned over the railing, watching the scene unfold with detachment. He had wanted this. For months, he had opposed Lawson's plans to bring Carter Technologies in as a strategic partner. He feared the influence of a black-led company, feared how it would threaten his power. Now, fate had handed him the perfect sabotage, and he hadn't even lifted a finger. When Lawson heard what happened, the news hit like a freight train. His assistant's voice trembled as she relayed the security footage and confirmed Jessica Carter had been forcibly removed from the building. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "Who did this?" he demanded. A quiet voice answered from the back of the room. "Ashley Monroe, sir." The receptionist. Panic swept through the leadership floor. Phones rang nonstop. Emails poured in. Jessica Carter had already begun a full media withdrawal from the Brightwell partnership, citing toxic culture and discrimination. Mark Reynolds pretended surprise. Later that day, Carter Tech's legal and PR teams issued a formal statement withdrawing from all partnerships with Brightwell, citing an incident of unprofessionalism and racially motivated disrespect that violates our core values. The media exploded. Headlines screamed. Stock prices dropped. And within hours, Brightwell's investors began to panic. Richard Lawson called an emergency meeting. Mark Reynolds sat at the far end of the table, silent and composed. "I saw Miss Carter in the lobby," Mark offered casually. But it looked like she was turned away. Reception didn't confirm the appointment. Lawson's eyes narrowed. "Turned away," he bellowed. "She's our most important strategic partner." The boardroom fell into tense silence. Ashley Monroe was summoned. She walked in, eyes wide with confusion. "Sir, I didn't know who she was. She didn't look like someone important," she stammered. Richard's rage was volcanic. "You didn't look? You didn't ask?" Ashley had no defense. And in front of the entire floor, Richard fired her. Downstairs, whispers spread like wildfire. Vanessa Lewis, still trembling from what she had witnessed, felt vindicated, but also deeply pained. Ashley was a symptom, not the disease. The rot ran deeper. It ran all the way to people like Mark Reynolds. That evening, Jessica received the full report. Her face was calm. Her voice, however, was firm. "Proceed with the discrimination and defamation lawsuit. Personally name Ashley Monroe and investigate internal collusion at Brightwell." Her team complied. The lawsuit was filed. Stock prices plummeted further. And then the leak happened. Emails. Dozens of them. Between Mark Reynolds and James Harper, CEO of Brightwell's top competitor, Nexus Tech plans, blueprints, confidential deals, shared in exchange for promises of power after a hostile takeover. Nexus denied everything. Reynolds was caught red-handed. The FBI opened an investigation. SEC agents arrived with subpoenas. Mark was arrested at his home, charged with industrial espionage and corporate fraud. His assets frozen. His future gone. At the same time, Brightwell Enterprises filed for bankruptcy. Investors fled. Partners abandoned ship. Thousands of employees packed their desks. Richard Lawson resigned in disgrace, his legacy shattered. Vanessa Lewis left the same day. She couldn't stay in the ashes. But then, the phone call came. "Miss Lewis?" a voice asked. "This is Jessica Carter." Vanessa nearly dropped her phone. Jessica continued, "I watched you that day. I know you wanted to speak up. I saw it. I'm launching something new, Vanessa. Something big. And I want you to lead it." "What is it?" Vanessa whispered. "The Carter Center for Innovation," Jessica replied. "And it's going to be housed in the old Brightwell building. I just bought it." Vanessa was speechless. "You'll be the CEO," Jessica said warmly. "Help me build something better." Vanessa accepted. The Carter Center opened with a powerful ceremony. Hundreds gathered. Jessica stood proudly beside Vanessa. "This building once stood for everything wrong," she said into the microphone. "Now it will stand for everything right." Thunderous applause. Ashley Monroe watched from afar, hollow and forgotten. Mark Reynolds, now a prisoner in federal custody, watched the footage on a flickering television screen. Richard Lawson, living in quiet isolation in Colorado, stared into his coffee, filled with regret. Vanessa thrived. Under her leadership, the Carter Center became a haven for underserved youth, offering training, mentorship, and startup support. Jessica Carter became a national figure, an advocate for equity in tech, a changemaker, a visionary. One evening, the two women stood on the rooftop, looking over the city lights. "We did it," Jessica said softly. Vanessa smiled. "We did more than that. We changed the game." Jessica nodded, her voice full of quiet pride. "And we're just getting started." Below them, the city buzzed with life and light, and the Carter Center for Innovation stood tall, a beacon of what happens when integrity triumphs over arrogance and compassion outshines prejudice.